Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over the two main things that you need to take into consideration when taking photos, and that is going to be lighting and composition. Here are some tips and tricks on how you can take more professional looking photos in Infinity Nikki from me, a professional photographer. To start, as any photographer will tell you, your most important job when taking any photo is lighting. And great news, Infinity Nikki makes lighting any scene super easy. If you plan to take a lot of photos, I recommend upgrading your lighting first and foremost, along with the poses as soon as you are able, with filters being the lowest priority. Poses are great because they go into the second main most important thing that we're going to go over in this video, which is composition. If you have great lighting and a great composition, you have a great photo. So when I first hop into photo mode, I immediately start trying to find my light and build my scene from there. Rotating both your camera position and your model position is going to change the light in the scene. You can actually see the lighting on Nikki change as you do so. It is absolutely worth spending the time to find a great lighting scenario. Using additional lights in the lighting tab will ensure you can get it just how you want it. You can also control the brightness, which is very useful. For this particular shot, we have the lighting set to a nice golden hour sunrise, and putting the light source behind Nikki gives us a very soft kind of glow. We're also using our aperture setting and our focal length in order to make this composition work and blur the background but still keep some of the flowers and Nikki herself in focus. We will definitely be going over more of this in the composition portion of this video, but for now, just notice that we haven't moved Nikki at all, only adjusted our focal length, and look how different those photos look, even though Nikki's been in the same place. Now, we're staying in the same place, but rotating our camera position and our model position. As soon as I do this, my first step is to find my new lighting. This gives us more of a contrast in the shot and less of that glowy soft effect. You can definitely see the difference between the two. In addition to giving us a variety of lighting effects, the game also allows us to actually change the time of day. You can change the time of day instantly by just selecting it in your Pair Pal. This little radial wheel is even color-coded so you can see what type of light you'll get based on the time of day. This is definitely a necessary step, especially if you're wanting a specific type of lighting scenario, and it makes it so easy. Sometimes just changing the day by an hour or two is going to completely change the lighting in your shot. For this shot in particular, I'm really drawn to the orange leaves and the blue of the background. For my lighting on Nikki herself, I want a nice golden edge light to kind of replicate like the sun. I also want to make sure Nikki has a nice fill light on her face so that her face is not too dark compared to the background. You then want to decide on a pose for Nikki and start putting together your composition, as remember, your lighting will change if you decide to move Nikki, rotate her, or change your composition in a certain way, so keep that in mind. I was really liking this shot here, but that flight fruit in the background sparkling was really bothering me, so I had to pick it and start my little shot over. This is the shot I came away with, and I'm really happy with it, but we would not have been able to achieve this had we not changed the time of day first. Like I said before though, Infinity Nikki really does give you all the tools you need to make a great lighting scenario no matter what. For a shot like this, as you can see, there's a bunch of junk behind us and it's the middle of the night. But as you can see, we're going to use the ambient lighting so that we get this nice edge light all around Nikki. We're going to take our aperture setting from f16 all the way up to f1.2, which is the most shallow depth of field that we can have. Meaning that we want the background to be as blurry as possible because the background is not the focus of this shot. Now, because this is a night shot, it makes it really easy for us to see the different types of lighting setups and how they can completely change the image. For this first one here, we've changed the light to be softer and to come in from the side. If we change back to the ambient lighting, you can see this gives Nikki a nice bright edge light all around her, and it's a light source that comes from the top. Both setups can work here, it's just more about preference, whether you want something a little more natural looking or something a little bit more high contrast. This game has made me love taking photos at night, no matter where I am. For this next shot, we're in the exact same place that we just were, only I've hopped up on this hay bale and I've changed the time of day to give us this nice sunrise. For this shot, the ambient light is a little bit too intense, so I'd like to settle on a pose first and then choose my lighting. I've chosen a left side fill light for Nikki's face here to give this more of a natural look, and it's a little bit more intense than the hue lighting would have been had we gone with that. I'm also taking this time to adjust for my contrast highlights and shadows, as well as the soft light intensity here that gives us that little bit of a glow. I also wasn't liking how much of the background I can see. As you can see those two little blue dots. So I wanted to adjust my focal length and position in order to get rid of that as much as I possibly could. I was really happy with the final shot I came away with here. Love it. Totally reminds me of Galinda. The next thing you're going to want to think about when it comes to lighting is colors. Don't worry, I'm not going to pull out a color wheel and go into a whole lecture about complementary colors and all that. That said, what I do want you to think about is the fact that you do have hue lighting in your lighting tab. This will allow you to add colors like yellows, blues, pinks, reds, and more to your lighting. Adding colored lights allows you to drastically change the look and feel of your image. For this shot in particular, I was really drawn to the contrast between the red and the blue, and then the purple mixed in there because of that lighting on the blue dress. To me, this color combination was more dynamic than any of the others, and with a little bit of editing, tweaking on highlights and shadows to really make those colors pop and make sure that the photo didn't look flat, I was really happy with the end result. Here is a look at this very same shot with different types of lighting setups. They all have different looks and feels, but remember, art is subjective, so choose what you like and go with your gut. Here's another quick example just to really show you how much the lighting can drastically change your image. Lighting is your most important job, so don't be afraid to mess around with it, try different things, and see what you like. Now that we've talked a little bit about how important lighting is and how much it can change your shot, it's time to talk about composition. It's important for your photos to be engaging to your viewers, and that's where composition comes in. To start, the rule of thirds is how you can ensure that your photo has a strong composition. The grid you see on the screen here is there to help you apply the rule of thirds. If you don't use this method and you start to use it, I promise you will see an instant improvement in your photography. The rule of thirds tells us that your subject should be placed somewhere on these lines, pushing to either the right or the left. The points where the lines intersect should be points that you want your viewers to focus on. For portraits, the head and eye line should fall about here. And the rule of thirds of course applies to landscapes as well. Now, this rule does not mean that you can never center your subject in the center of the frame. However, if you choose to do this, just make sure that your lighting and background are keeping the scene interesting and that you're balanced on both sides. You want to use your background to frame your subject and use the leading lines that already exist in frame to draw the viewer's eye exactly where you want it to be. When you start paying attention to your leading lines in the background, your compositions are going to drastically improve. You also want to make sure that you're paying attention to your positive and negative space and the shapes around your subject. All of these elements are going to work together to create a successful composition. And just a quick note before we move on, I tend to rotate almost all of my images at least slightly. I find it makes for a more dynamic composition. Next, let's talk a little bit about depth of field. Simply put, this is how much of the background you want to be in focus. Using a deep depth of field like f16 will ensure everything in the background is in focus, while a shallow depth of field like f1.2 will make everything in the background blurry. It can also produce a really nice bokeh lighting effect in the background. You almost always want a shallow depth of field when you're taking portraits, as it will take your shot from looking flat to looking much more dynamic. Next, we need to talk about focal length and camera position. Now, if you've done any of the forced perspective quests in the game, you should already have a pretty good idea about how this works, as the game does a decent job of explaining this concept with said quests. To put it simply, at 55mm, you're going to have a much more narrow field of view in terms of what you can see in the background. This would be the equivalent to shooting with like a telephoto lens. Whereas 15mm, which would be your standard, or even 10mm, is going to give you a much wider angle, and you can see much more in terms of the background. Adjusting your camera position to go either closer or farther from your subject is also going to change how much of that background that you can see. For example, here we are as close to our subject as we can possibly be, with our focal length at 55mm. You can really see the difference here going from the 10mm to the 55 in terms of background. Now, if we change our position to be as far away from our subject as we can be, and then go back up to 55mm, you can see how much that changes the composition of the photo. Always keep this in mind when setting up your shot, and remember, this can be used to place items not only in the background but in the foreground of the shot as well, which again makes for some really great compositions. And don't forget, when posing Nikki, you can actually make her look at the camera, which is going to change the look of the pose entirely. And you can even go frame by frame through her poses. That way you can ensure that you're getting that exact pose that you want. You don't have to worry so much about that decisive moment thing that they talk about in photography, other than the background, of course, because that's always still moving. But being able to freeze that pose exactly how you want it is awesome. The last thing, but certainly not the least, is don't forget about editing. While you might not think your photo needs it, as the game can look absolutely gorgeous on its own, just know that a little can go a long way here, and just a small amount of editing can give your photo that extra edge that really makes it pop. I often do my editing as I go, but will always make this my final step to ensure that I can add any finishing touches or final tweaks that I see fit. And one final thing, if you didn't know, you can actually pose with other players and view the photos that others have taken with your Nikki as well. This is pretty much my favorite part of the game. I love seeing all the photos everyone is taking, and especially the ones that have posted with my Nikki. It's been a lot of fun. So thanks for anybody that's taken a picture with me. I'm hoping to see more soon. And that's pretty much all I have for right now. I hope that you guys found this video useful in some way. I know I didn't go into the actual editing process in this video. If that's something that you would like to see, everyone's editing style is a little bit different, but if you're curious about mine specifically and want a more in-depth look about how I personally edit, let me know and I can make a short video about that as well. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, if this video helped you at all, and just anything that you want to talk about. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.